The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, everybody. This is Camille at the State Department of Education, and this is the Sunsetting Grant Guidance webinar. This is required for those of you that are in round 7, year 5 of your grant, and will be closing out this year. So I appreciate you joining us this morning. Andrew is also on the call, however, he's not in the room with me. So you get to listen to me all morning. But we will make this quick. I want to make sure that each of you can hear me and can see the PowerPoint. So if you will please raise your hand if you can hear me. All right. Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much. I do want to let you know that the call is also being recorded, and the call along with the documents that we're going to discuss will be made available on the 21st CCLC website within usually 48 hours. So once that's done, we'll send an email out to each one of you to let you know that that is available. All right, so just standard template. Andrew and I are overseeing this process. Andrew asked that I take on the responsibilities of the sunsetting grant, so that is the reason I'm conducting this call. Our agenda for today, we're going to go through the scenarios of what constitutes closing out a grant. We're going to talk about the policy that dictates this process. We're going to talk about records retention, equipment and supplies, finances, licensing, annual performance report, and then a final closeout, and then post-closeout requirements. As we go through this process, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those into the question box, and we'll stop at different times throughout the call to go over those. So, jumping in. Scenarios. So there are 4 scenarios that we are looking at as we talk about these different documents and requirements that would close a grant. They are: the grant is coming to a close, but the program is staying open. The grant is coming to a close and the program is ending. The grant is ending prior to the full 5 years of the grant award. And the final one, the program has received another 21st CCLC grant. So these are the different scenarios that could happen that require programs to go through the closeout process or the sunsetting process. So you may identify yourself right now with 1 or 2 of those. And as we go through this, you can be thinking about how this applies to you based on where you fall in this discussion. All right, so the policy. The State Department of Education closes out 21st CCL grants in accordance with the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, or EDGAR, and the Idaho 21st CCLC Subgrantee Guidance. So as we go through this, you'll notice that there's a few references to EDGAR specifically, and the Subgrantee Guidance. Hopefully none of this material is new to you, but this is where all the policies and procedures for closing out a grant come from. And subgrantees are required to review this guidance and other applicable state and federal regulations concerning the closeout of this grant. So we aimed to pull all of that information into this process and into these documents so that you have access to them right now. So the first thing that we're going to go through is records retention. Subgrantees are required to maintain all of your fiscal records and all of your project experience records. The fiscal records, those would include documents such as your budgets, your drawdown requests, anything related to additional funding that might have come in, matching documentation, anything related to funding this program. The project experience records would be the documents such as your calendars, your program outcomes, your attendance documents, who came to the program. Anything of that nature must be retained. Records must be retained for 5 years and 1 additional year for audit purposes. So for a total of 6 years after the grant has closed. So you're looking at quite a long storage time from the first year your grant was opened to 6 years after the grant has closed. The U.S. Department of Education and the federal government does allow that these records be maintained in a readable electronic version, but we want to caution you against saving them on something that could get lost or destroyed, such as a jump drive or possibly CDs. If you're burning them onto a CD, you want to make sure that that somebody within your organization knows where they are at, so in case an audit comes up, they have access to this information. So work within your own organizations. Almost all the organizations that we are speaking with today have policies and procedures for maintaining records, and you want to make sure that you are aware of what those policies and procedures are. All right. One other piece I do want to make you aware of is all of this information is contained within a guidance document that we will be sharing out on the website as well, and goes into a little bit more detail on each one of these. So the next thing we want to share with you is the procedure for equipment and supplies. Subgrantees are required to submit a full list of all equipment purchased during the 5-year grant. Hopefully this document that's shared here is not new to you. This has been in use for a number of years, but last year became part of your annual performance report that you had to submit. And it goes through and it lists out the equipment, the descriptions, the location, the purchase price, and so forth. Towards the end of the document, it shows you where you can put the status of the disposition, whether it's going to be retained, sold, if it's going to be transferred to another organization. This needs to be completed for all equipment for the entire 5 years of the grant. So I know we do have some directors that came on midway through the grant. You're going to want to start this process early to list everything out that's there. You also want to be having discussions with your organization about what they want to do with this equipment. This document is found on our website. I want to show you where that's at in case you are unaware. So this is the 21st CCLC website from the State Department of Education. The easiest way to get there right now is from the homepage to click on schools and then go over to after school programs. Down on the website towards the bottom, you're going to see all of our different tabs that include information. This document is under Files and under Fiscal Management, and it's the very last one. It is an Excel document, so let me open that up and show you a few different things on it. Oh, one moment. There we go. All right, so you should now be seeing the Excel document. One of the things that we want to make you aware of when you come into Excel, sometimes you'll receive this yellow bar across the top that is a protected view. If that shows up, just click Enable. All that is saying is that you are using either an older or a newer Excel software than what is currently loaded on your system. So that just enables it to be used on your system. Down across the bottom, there are 3 tabs. One is for equipment, one is for supplies, which we'll talk about in just a minute, and then the last one is other program inventory. So make sure that you complete each one of these tabs and that you are aware that they are down there. It works, you know, I think most of you have gotten pretty good at this because of the new budget workbook that's being used, but we just wanted to make you aware of that. So with with equipment, equipment is defined as tangible personal property having a useful life of more than 1 year and a per unit acquisition cost which equals or exceeds $250. So anything that falls into that category, you are going to have to list out on this spreadsheet. Now that is purchase price, that is not current retail value. That is when you purchased it, it was $250 or more. Once you've listed everything out on this spreadsheet, then you can start the discussion of what scenario you fall into, and we're going to use the example that the program is ending and will not be continuing in any format within the organization. If that is the case, you'll talk with your organization about how this equipment is going to be used at the close of the grant, and you're going to list that information over in the disposition fields. If a program is not going to be continuing after this funding cycle, then the equipment must first be offered to other title programs within the organization. And then the second scenario, the second one is if they do not want that equipment, then it must be offered to other 21st CCLC programs, usually starting closest to where you are at. So you can see this is a discussion that you want to start right away and be thinking about what is going to be the process. In this example, we used if the program was closing and not continuing. In other examples, if the program was going to continue on but not under 21st funds, then the equipment can stay with the program. If you write and receive another 21st grant, then the equipment can stay with the program, but after the close of this grant, it is no longer required that it be tracked and reported to the State Department of Education. You have to follow your organization's tracking policy at that point. So that is equipment. The next slide we talk about is supplies. Subgrantees are required to submit a full list of residual supplies if the total amount exceeds $5,000 and was purchased during the grant. So if you have a lot of supplies, I would strongly encourage you to somehow incorporate those into your program during the next 5 months so that you are not required to report them to the State Department of Education. It's encouraged that you not go out and buy a lot of supplies towards the end of the year. And supplies are those consumable things that are used within 1 year. Because if the program does exceed this $5,000 in supplies, one, you have to detail it out for us, just like you do with the equipment. And then it comes into play as to where are these supplies going to go? Are they going to go to another federal program? And if that federal program does not want them, then EDGAR requires that the subgrantee either return all of those supplies to the State Department of Education or sells them and returns the funds to the State Department of Education. So hopefully you see that it's quite a hassle to deal with supplies, those items that are consumable within 1 year, towards the end of the grant. So keep that in mind as you're working on your budgets and your program plans from this point forward. All right, moving on. Licensing. If your program was required to be licensed to run, meaning you were running outside of a regular school building, then it is your responsibility if the program is ending to notify the appropriate licensing agency. Typically that is health and welfare because your license will need to be canceled. So this one does not typically apply to most of you, but we just need to make you aware of it. All right, the next, annual performance report. Sunsetting subgrantees are required to participate and submit all required documents that relate to the annual performance report at both the state and the federal level. So even though part of that annual performance report in the past has shown us what you're going to be doing in the next year, you don't have to do that portion, but it also is an evaluation of what happened in the last year, which would be your final year. So you're going to be required to submit that documentation. We are going to go into more detail as to what the annual performance report looks like for this coming year in a webinar, both at the spring meeting in Sun Valley and also in a webinar that is being offered in February. We're going to hopefully make that process a lot easier and a little bit easier to understand and a little more engaging. So plan on that coming up, but please know that you will be required to be part of that process. Subgrantees that fall into scenarios 1, 2, and 3, meaning that the program is either continuing without 21st funding or is ending, will be required to submit the 21st CCLC tactile report. And that is going to be done using an approved Excel workbook that Andrew has put together. And you're going to complete all of the data that is in that workbook prior to the end of your grant and submit that. And then the State Department of Education will take that information and submit that to the tactile report when it opens. So we will talk more about that in Sun Valley. We'll actually have you break off and come to discuss that with us. The last thing is subgrantees not receiving a new grant are still required to attend the Spring Directors Meeting and the Idaho Prevention and Support Conference. This has been a touchy subject in the past, so we want to make it, we want to put it out there up front that by the prevention conference, if you are writing another grant, you will have already been notified whether you are going to be funded or not. And so it's tough to come to this meeting knowing that you are not going to continue on in funding and sit through an all-day meeting and hear information that may or may not apply for the balance of your grant. So please plan now that regardless you'll be coming, and we're going to ask that hopefully you come, if not with a good attitude, with an attitude of still learning and still having the opportunity to be in the room. So just keep that in mind. We will have breakouts, as I mentioned, specifically for grantees that are not continuing on, so that they have the opportunity to step out of the room and we can discuss things that pertain specifically to them. And we want to make that transition as easy as possible, but just be aware of that. All right, moving on. So final closeout. The State Department of Education will close the grant out when it determines that all applicable administrative actions and all required work of the subgrantee has been completed. So we won't close this out until we have received all of your final annual performance report, the tactile report, all of your final budget information. All of that information must be received before we close out the grant. Once that is done, a final closeout letter will be sent to the authorized applicant organization with a CC to the business manager and the program director, letting them know that this has been completed. 1 minute. I think I've missed a slide. So let me go back here. Yeah, we didn't talk about this. Let me talk about finances. I don't know how I missed this one. So finances, budget revisions. Any budget revision on this grant is due no later than June 15th, 2017. New purchases, technology, software, equipment, supplies, contracts, etc. will not be accepted or approved after programming has ended. So if your program ends the end of April, we will not accept new purchase requests after that time point. A lot of times what's happened in the past is grantees get to the end of their grant and realize they have a lot of money still on the table, and they want to purchase technology, or they want to enter into a new contract that may happen, during the last 2 months of the grant cycle, etc. Please be aware that we will not entertain those types of items. The grant is coming to a close, and so new purchasing should happen prior to the students leaving the end of programming or not at all. All purchases that are not already in the approved budget must be approved by the State Department of Education. This has always been in place, but we want to make you aware of it. Again, just bring it to your attention that as you wrap up your programs, you really want to pay attention to your budgets and make sure that you are covering what needs to be covered and do not have a large excess at the end of the grant. Your final payments must be submitted to the State Department of Education by September 15th, 2017. So we know that the grant ends on June 30th. However, it can take a little bit of time for those final payments to come through, for any personnel charges to clear, and so we give you some time for that to take place. September 15th is the cutoff date for that. The final payments will go out on September 25th. You need to be aware that we will hold back 10% of the grant award until all the closeout requirements are met. So you want to make sure that all the final reports are in, the inventory, all of that stuff is done in order that we pay out the full grant amount, the full amount that's being requested. If you do not anticipate spending your entire grant award, we need notification of that as soon as possible, because we have a small window that we have to work within before we have to revert those funds back to the federal government. So we want to make sure that those funds stay in Idaho and are used the best possible. So please keep us in the loop of what's happening. All right, so sorry to jump around. Let me go back here now. All right, so the procedure for post-closeout. We just want to make you aware that even after the grant is closed, there are some actions that could still take place depending on where things fall. And those include the right to audit or review any documentation, the obligation for you to return any funds that were spent or credited back to the grant. You still have to manage the disposition of your property if that hadn't already taken place, and you have to retain the records. And then any questions that we have regarding final reports, we can still come back and ask. So we want to make sure that we know who at the district to work with if any of that comes up. So just a quick timeline for you of how things will play out over the next 7 months, or actually almost 9 months. So today we're releasing the guidelines for a sunsetting grant. On the 31st of December, for all grantees, not just sunsetting, 25% of grant funds must be spent and requested from the State Department of Education. If they are not, then there will be other requirements that you'll have to go through. February 17th, we will be conducting the annual performance report webinar, where we will go over what that annual performance report for this year will look like and what will be required. April 12th through the 14th will be the Spring Directors Meeting and the Idaho Prevention and Support Conference. June 30th, your final reports will be due to the State Department of Education. September 15th, final payments are due to the State Department of Education. And September 30th, round 7 grants close. So that means we close out all payments, and final closeout letters are sent if all requirements are met. So I have ran through this really quickly. Are there any questions that anyone has? All right, let's see. One question, is this referring to the 2018 Prevention Conference? No, what I'm referring to here is the 2017 Prevention Conference, so the conference that's coming up this next year. However, I know that there are a few people on the call that are not sunsetting this year. These are the same requirements that you will have to meet when you go through the sunsetting process. The next question, when is the inventory list due? It is due June 30th. However, if you can get it into us earlier, that is better, because we do have to approve what is happening with that, with the equipment. So typically, as soon as the program ends, students are out the door, no longer coming, and you are able to go through your equipment and inventory all of that, then you can submit that documentation. Most likely what we will do is, again, have a folder out on the STFP site that says Closeout, and you will submit all of your documentation through that system. Any other questions? All right. So, in conclusion, the Round 7 21st CCLC grant will close out by September 30th, 2017. The awarding of any new 21st grants does not exclude you from having to go through this process. And that's another thing that you need to be very much aware of. Many of you are writing for another grant. Keep these two separate. You have to close out your Round 7 grant, even if you are awarded a Round 12 grant. They are completely separate. Once you report all of the equipment and tell us what's happening with it, then that's done. We don't have to do anything else with that. Same thing with supplies. The financial information should be kept completely separate. So you close out one grant and open up a brand new one should you be funded again. We want you to begin now to prepare all of your stakeholders, your students, parents, partners, communities, etc., that this grant is closing. So start having those conversations right away. That is the closeout, the sunsetting grant process. If you have any further questions, please let us know. We're happy to answer them throughout this whole process. You can direct those questions to me. And thank you for your time today. I'll stay on the line for just a minute more if any more questions come in.